What is up, guys? Chris from the Review Cave here, and today are you as excited as I am because the official sequel to Seven Deadly Sins, The Four Nights of Apocalypse, has officially released its first chapter, and I cannot contain my excitement because I finally get to see this new sequel series only like half a year after the original has finally finished. And the anime is about to reach its final season right now, so it is a good time to be a Seven Deadly Sins fan. But with all that out of the way, let's get started with this 70-page, according to the count, first chapter for this brand new series. So, Four Nights of Apocalypse gives us this new colored page, and it shows a kid running to catch a bird and trying to get his grandfather to help and catch it. The grandfather throws a pitchfork right at this bird, manages to hit it right in midair as it falls down. And this new character runs into the air, grabs this bird, seemingly twists it in mid-air, and then grabs onto the ledge as we learn that this kid's name is Percival. Now, if you don't know, Percival has actually a name of one of Arthur's Knights of the Round Table in the fictional stories about King Arthur. And I honestly thought that this story was going to focus around the children of the Seven Deadly Sins due to some of the artwork that we did get at the end of the original season, based on the artwork that we got from the original series. But no, it's following an entirely different character, which I'm honestly pretty okay with, because as much as I would have loved to see Tristan or Lancelot as the main characters of the sequel series, I have no doubt they're going to show up again, especially with how Suzuki managed to create his series and that special Lancelot one-shot that he released a couple of months back. But anyway, seeing that we have a new main character, he is very small and it does kind of look like Meliodas, even though it's not Tristan. But either way, as we continue on, they go back to their house, and Percival manages to slice and dice up this bird, and then him and his grandfather roast and eat it. And as they enjoy this meal, we do get to see one little panel of a mark right underneath the bird that begins to disappear, which is kind of signals that something might actually happen later down in the chapter. But for now, Percival and his grandfather get ready to do some special Celtic wrestling called Gorin. And as they begin to fight, Percival goes in with immense agility, which kind of resembles Meliodas. Again, I am very happy because I love Meliodas. But anyway, Percival goes in, tackles his grandfather, tries to push him down into the ground, and right when he thinks he's actually going to win, his grandfather picks him up and then slams him to the ground. And as he's complaining that he lost again, his grandfather says that he actually had a try, which got Percival very excited that he actually managed to get his grandfather to try, which we're not entirely sure if he was just kidding or if he was just trying to be nice to help build up Percival's spirit. As his grandfather actually begins to reminisce about him being a child and how he's growing up very quickly, a sudden realization comes to him, and I originally thought that he thought of that something very bad was about to happen related to that mark from earlier. But no, it turns out he and Percival forgot that it was Percival's birthday. Hell, even Percival forgets how old he's going to be. Turns out he's 16 and that he's practically an adult already, which Percival ends up doing a bit of a joke, saying that he is now old enough to drink with his grandfather, but his grandfather plays it off and says that it's too early for him. But his grandfather then brings Percival to the edges of this cliff, and we see this big 2-page spread showing a vastness of clouds, and he ends up saying that this area that they're currently living on is called the God's Finger. And Percival literally is about to say what he was about to say and be like, "You think I want to fly off God's Finger and go on a journey around the world?" He's like, "Nah, nothing special," which surprises his grandfather because at his age and how his father was, they all wanted to basically go off on an adventure. And then he starts coming up with a bunch of ideas, saying that one area is the island where the creations of the goddesses called the Sky People live, and even Percival calls him out on this, saying that he doesn't even know that. But then he goes on to mention Britannia below, and even comes up with a bunch of different stories, like twisting towers where eccentric magicians dwell, knights who sail ships of illusions through the heavens, caves with countless openings that lead to hell, evil lake princesses that tempt heroes and imprison them, labyrinth forests that you can never escape should you lose your way, which I'm gonna like this little bit of a lot of this stuff that's going on, because the twisting towers with the eccentric magicians dwell is an obvious nod to Merlin. Knights who sail ships of illusions through the sky is also to possibly go through and how he has his memory magic. We have caves that lead to hell, which, well, there's a lot of speculation, but it could end up talking about Meliodas, Evil Lake Princess, obviously Lady Lake, and the Labyrinth Forests. It's basically a way to allude to the Fairy King's Forest. But the funny thing is, as his grandfather was telling these stories, Percival just went off, grabbed a fishing rod, and asked him and asked his grandfather if he would come and skyfish with him. And then we go on to the night where they're eating a skyfish, and then the conversation goes back to that, and then the conversation gets turned to how Percival's father actually left the house on an adventure when he was 16, but then Percival says that, didn't he die? Coughing up nervously, he's like, it's nothing. But then his grandfather asks Percival if he feels rather lonely just being here on this mountain with... Then his grandfather asks Percival if he's actually lonely, being stuck on this island with him all the time. But Percival answers in the most wholesome way possible, saying that he's fine as long as he's with his grandfather. While liking what he says, his grandfather actually brushes it off and says that Percival is boring. But as Percival is getting some more bows and arrows fixed up, they try to make plans so that they could possibly go hunting again tomorrow. But then his grandfather repeats something that he says before he drinks. Those eyes see through evil, that mouth speaks the truth, that heart is filled with justice, that sword smashes evil. And apparently he says this every time he's drunk. And his grandfather says that it's just a reminder. But his grandfather also told Percival that he's still a kid, but sometimes you'll have to defeat evil to help the weak. And then Percival finishes what his grandfather was saying earlier, and you must become someone who protects and risks their lives for things they hold dear. And then Percival smiles, saying that he'll protect his grandpa. And as the night goes on, Percival wakes up in the middle of the night, heads to the edge, and ends up repeating what his grandfather had told him, which shows that he actually was listening. And what's very great is that he gets super excited after remembering everything that was said, jumping around, doing acrobatics, running around in circles around that whole island, surprisingly not waking up his grandfather, and then he flops down onto the ground and says that as much as he wants to go on an adventure and he can't stay still, he's basically content with staying with his grandfather due to how much he loves him. But then we get an interesting page that shows his grandfather out in the distance, waving towards him, trying to say something. And as he tries to get closer, Percival wakes up, and then he ends up singing A Night in the Clouds. And this is honestly a really nice design for a holy night from what I can tell. I'm honestly really happy that we got some more interaction because we're already halfway through the chapter and nothing too action-packed happened. But as we see, apparently this magic night, this holy night, is actually looking for someone. And what's interesting is that he said he shot down my messenger, and judging by how it turned out, it's definitely him, which means he was looking for somebody. And then that bird that they shot down at the very start of the chapter is actually related to this holy night. As he starts to think that this guy is in the middle of nowhere and that he's searching incredibly hard for him, Percival goes up and says, "Oh, are you the knight who sails a ship of illusions for the heavens?" And if the stories were true, and the knight basically goes off and greets Percival and asks where Bulgus is, which is actually his grandfather's real name. And the knight tells Percival that they are basically old friends and that they were once holy knights. The knight then says that 16 years ago that they basically broke off ties and now he has urgent business that must be resolved. So Percival, being the naive little kid he is, points towards their house, saying that his grandfather is fixing breakfast. But Percival isn't really concerned about that because he's super excited about this boat that seems to be flying in the sky. And then the knight says, "Go ahead and go on it." But then he says something rather ominous and foreboding. He's basically saying, "What a cruel man. He raised you while hiding the truth." Percival gets a big shiver up his spine, but he basically brushes it off as the knight goes away and he starts to play with the boat. But the boat isn't moving, and it basically comes to a realization that it might be because he himself is not a holy knight. But after remembering what the knight told him, Percival basically gets a very bad feeling and starts to run towards his house. Cut back to the house, and we see the grandfather basically cutting up everything for breakfast, as the voice says in the distance that he's using the sword that was given to him by his majesty is being used as a kitchen knife, and that it's the same old him. Bulgus grabs his sword to try and attack and block, but he's lunged right through his house with what seems to be like a cross-type magic attack, which is shown in the dust that it was all from the fingers. It was an attack launched by the fingertips of this Holy Knight. The Holy Knight begins to say that he has been searching for Bulgus for years, ever since they betrayed their master and fled 16 years ago. Again, 16 years ago is honestly a very important number because Percival is 16 and his father basically died apparently 16 years ago, which is honestly a very interesting way of making a connection between this Holy Knight, Percival's grandfather, Percival, and Percival's father. But no time is left because Bulgus lunges forward to try and attack him. And then he corrects him, saying that it was your side who turned against him. I only abandoned him. And as the fight continues, we see some awesome swordplay as expected from Nakaba Suzuki. But then the knight does the exact same attack he did that Bulgus blocked earlier, only this time it broke right through his body and the stone behind him, leaving a fatal wound on Bulgus as Percival notices from atop the ledge of the cliff. After discovering this, Percival is asking why he's doing this and to stop, but the Holy Knight does the same attack on the mountain to show how strong he is, in a way to try and scare the kid, saying that you're up next. But Percival grabs a piece of the rubble, lunges off the hill. Percival grabs a piece of the rubble, lunges off the hill, and throws it straight at the Holy Knight, telling him to get away from his grandfather. But without any hesitation and with little to no effort, he breaks the rock, and then as Percival is using his acrobatics to try and land a very strong hit with a large boulder, the exact same thing happens. And while saying that that Percival himself has no discipline, Bulgus grabs the Holy Knight from behind, telling Percival to run. And even though Percival won't leave him, the Holy Knight said he won't let either of them escape, as he unleashes a barrage of the exact same magic attack on Bulgus, leaving multiple wounds that are rather fatal, shocking and scarring young Percival. Bulgus falls to the ground as the Holy Knight says that if there's anyone you should blame, it would be his grandfather, as he picks up his finger, points at Percival, and lands another blow on his chest as Percival falls to the ground, and we see the exact same aftermath shot from the cliff below. Right before Percival is about to fall to the ground, he musters all of his strength to lunge forward and try and land one more hit on the Holy Knight, but it obviously does nothing, and the Holy Knight kicks him away into the rubble. As it seems the snow is falling, we get the reveal of the name of this Holy Knight, Ironside. Bulgus asks him why he's come to kill him right now after all these years. He then says that some days ago an ominous prophecy was made, the arrival of an existence that will lead our Lord King Arthur to his doom. So this implies, or basically confirms, that Bulgus and Ironside, this new Holy Knight, served by the side of King Arthur from the Seven Deadly Sins, who is now ruling Camelot. And I honestly am really excited that we're finally getting confirmation of a character that everyone thought and prophesied and basically theorized was going to be one of the main focuses of the series. And I'm so happy that we're going to see Arthur again eventually, but for now, that's just going to be how it is. Ironside goes on to say what this new threat is called: the Four Knights of Apocalypse. And the truth is, he doesn't even know the details. If that's the case, until they reap any seeds of possibility, no matter how far they fall, they cannot say for sure that there is no that there's no real change of basically Bulgus being one of those four knights. And Bulgus basically says, does he suspect Percival? And he says, it's all for, and Ironside just leaves, saying that it's all for the greater good. Any of this, so this confirms that the Four Knights of Apocalypse might not actually be the villains of the series, but actually the main protagonists, and Percival being one of them. Now, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of hoping that the Four Knights of Apocalypse would be just the villains of the show, and then we have the kids of the Seven Deadly Sins joining together to fight them. Now, this could still very well be the case. We just don't know yet. If Percival and possibly the other Sin's children all come together, then this could honestly be very interesting to see, because it's prophesied that they'll be the end of King Arthur. And if we remember from the end of the Seven Deadly Sins manga, Arthur has control over the powers of chaos, which can manipulate and warp reality, and he basically has the supreme power over everyone. He's the strongest character in existence right now, and if that power goes out of control, it could be a huge threat. So it's very possible that this prophecy is that the Four Knights of Apocalypse could actually stop a potentially out of control Arthur if he were to ever lose control of his powers. But that's just my thought process on how this could go. But back to the story. Bulgus is gasping for air and looking for Percival, and Percival is surprisingly up despite his wounds. He's crying, he's up on his 2 feet, saying that he couldn't protect him. And it's basically like he was not fatally wounded like his grandfather. Possibly that the knight just went easy on Percival, or thought that the minimum amount of power was needed to kill him. Which, seeing how Percival is seemingly walking around like it's nothing after a few seconds of recovering, there is something special about this kid. And I'm curious to see what revelations will be on Percival, whether he's a demon, whether he's the child of a goddess, whether he just blessed, or if he's like the chosen one or something like that. We just don't know. But I cannot wait to see how important Percival is to the story and how he begins to grow and change as a character. As they're both apologizing on whether or not to protect each other and that they're a precious family, Bulgus says that from now on that Percival needs to find something to protect, to trust his heart and find someone important that can walk through life with him. Percival saying that this might actually be a punishment onto him because he lied. He really wanted to go on an adventure, but he just couldn't leave his grandfather. But his grandfather then says that he lied to him also. The truth is, he was glad when Percival said that he wouldn't be lonely as long as he had him. Percival goes to check on him as he falls to the ground. Percival being like, "You're still staying so calm after taking so much damage." And hell, he even says that it's not like it was easy. He was trained by his grandfather every day for 16 whole years. As Percival asks who this person in the red armor is, which confirms that Ironside does in fact have red armor, but asking what a holy knight is. Bulgus tells Percival that Ironside is actually Percival's father. Like I said earlier, coincides with the 16 years that has been said multiple times in this first chapter. Percival's 16 years old. It's been 16 years since Bulgus and Ironside cut ties, and it has been 16 years since Percival's father had seemingly died. Or at least that's what Bulgus told him. So it's obvious something happened where they betrayed King Arthur in some way, shape, or form, and Bulgus had to take Percival away and hide somewhere, training him for the day where Percival would have to end up leaving and going off on his own, potentially to meet King Arthur in some way, shape, or form. I mean, obviously Bulgus had no idea about this prophecy about the Four Knights of Apocalypse, but it is something that might actually warrant how special and strong that Percival might actually be. But anyway, he's saying that Percival can't really accept everything that's going on, but Bulgus says that there's no time to explain, but gives Percival a goal, that if he wants to know everything, to go find Ironside, his father, and ask him directly, and to prepare for a long journey because he will most likely be alone. But despite Percival crying, saying that he doesn't want to be alone and that he doesn't want his grandfather to die, his grandfather pats his head and says that even if he dies, to have hope, to be my hope, as he passes away in front of Percival. Seemingly the next day, Percival buries his grandfather, looking at the clothes and helmet that was left for him, saying that he's going on a journey. And with one of the last words spoken by his grandfather, that I've always been and always will be with you forever. As he clenches the helmet, puts it on, and gets ready to go on a journey so he can find his father, his grandfather's killer, and uncover the truth. And I love this narration saying that he was feeling anxiety, fear, and longing. He stepped forward into a journey of great destiny as he just topples over his own coat as the chapter ends. Now, this is an obvious setup chapter from any other series, which I honestly enjoyed. And we can all tell that this character resembles Meliodas in some way, shape, or form. And even though I do think that Percival somewhat got the idea of his grandfather's death on his shoulders, he is still marching forward because that is what his grandfather wants. What happens in this one chapter sets up the entirety of the story, making it so that Percival is supposedly one of these four Knights of Apocalypse. His grandfather and his father possibly did something horrible to betray King Arthur, And this could end up being the journey that sets up his meeting with the Sins and their children. And for all we know, this could actually be a red herring, meaning that despite the Sins still existing in this world, from what I can understand, since King Arthur's around, it's very possible that Percival is either one of the Four Knights of Apocalypse, or the Four Knights of Apocalypse are in fact other beings that they will have to fight and be the main antagonists of the entire series. There's still a lot of unknowns, but for a first chapter, I honestly cannot wait to see what happens next. And this was just a really amazing first chapter for a brand new series. And I feel like Nakaba can actually really spread his wings, despite all of the things he set up and did in the previous series of the Seven Deadly Sins. There's so much for him to tell, and more ways to expand the world of the Sins. But that's just my thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit lengthy for a review, but this was a very, very long chapter, and I wanted to get every single detail into this one video. If you enjoyed this video, I will do everything I can to get this one series a weekly review schedule. Every Thursday or Friday, I will have a review of the next chapter of Four Knights of Apocalypse up and running almost weekly. Now, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will do everything I can to keep up with that schedule that I just told you about. But if you guys support me by liking this video and subscribing to the channel, I will manage to keep up all these reviews and maybe even do some special Four Knights of Apocalypse content specifically for the series, whether it be theories or speculations. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at the official Review Cave for updates on future videos. And don't forget to comment down below on what you think this series could end up being. What could potentially happen, how Percival will meet the Sins, or whether or not he is actually supposed to be one of these Four Knights of Apocalypse, or if they're just alluded to be the main antagonists of the series, and what exactly Percival's father and grandfather did to betray and abandon King Arthur. What's up guys, Chris from the Review Cave here, and today I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts on Chapter 2 of the Seven Deadly Sins sequel series, The Four Knights of the Apocalypse. Now, where we left off with last chapter, we got the introduction to Percival, his grandfather, and Ironside, who was seemingly Percival's personal nemesis for the series at this point. After killing his grandfather, Percival leaves God's Finger, which is this giant mountain that leaps all the way above the clouds, where him and his grandfather have been living for the past 16 years. And after his grandfather's death, he decides to go on a journey to find his father and discover why he killed his grandfather. And just so you know, there will be massive spoilers for the Four Knights of Apocalypse manga, due to the fact that I will be talking about the latest events in the story as this series continues. So we start off this chapter as Percival is climbing down the mountain so he can reach Britannia. And even though he's climbed for a whole day, he hasn't reached below the clouds yet. So after resting for a little bit and thinking of his grandfather, he manages to get down and see the vastness of Britannia. However, he gets incredibly excited and accidentally lets go of the mountain, falling down and crashing into a flying bird monster. Percival jokingly says that since it's basically saved his life, he won't eat any of its kind again, for this bird only to throw him down again. But then Percival then crashes into a tree and then falls down basically unharmed after a few somersaults in order to secure his landing. When he gets up, he sees this little fox-like creature staring at him. Percival, never seeing a creature like that before, basically goes on to say who he is and that he took him 2 whole days to climb down that mountain in order to get to the lands of Britannia. Fox seemingly confused, and since it's not a talking animal like Hawk, unfortunately, so it doesn't seem like it's going to be joining Percival anytime soon. And Percival just trying to make friends with this wild fox, basically saying his life story, asking where there's villages, where there's people, and what his grandfather told him. And as this fox walks away, Percival tries to catch up to it, and then the fox just runs away. But after the fox runs away, Percival manages to leave the forest, and he sees a bunch of people in a cart off in the distance. It's revealed that they are the Cat's Street Troupe, and they are basically a wandering circus performer troupe that right now are in the middle of nowhere just practicing their routine. Simple enough. And even though they're all practicing, like the leader seemingly has some sort of minor fire-based magic, using it for some nice little parlor tricks, and the woman seemingly has some sort of ability for misdirection, as the monkey she has basically like appears and reappears through her ring. It could be magic, or it could just be sleight of hand. it is most likely magic since we are in the world of the 7 deadly sins after all. And as the troop leader is pointing towards the third member, he's scolding him as he is not practicing at all. This guy Donnie, who is basically saying, who are we practicing for? There's no point in performing if there's no cash in it. And as he's saying this, Percival starts clapping, saying how they're awesome, and everyone's shocked that someone's there. Percival's saying that he wants to see it again, and right before any of the other troop members can answer him, Donnie comes up to him and asks if he has any money. And as the other troop members are telling him that they're not charging anything since, you know, they're basically practicing. But as Donnie asks Percival for money, he's like, what's money? Seemingly pissed off, he asks for the luggage of Percival. Percival, as the naive child, just gives it to him. And then right before anything happens, he basically shows Percival what his power is. And it seems to be some sort of gravity magic, because as he slams his two hands together, Percival starts to float. And then as Percival is asking how he's doing this, he basically gets into the cart with his friends and just starts driving off immediately. And the other two are just basically scolding and yelling at him for stealing from a kid and just leaving him floating in the air. Even though he's saying that the effects of his spell will wear off soon, they're basically going to leave a kid in the air all by himself in the vast wilderness. And as this troop is contemplating where this kid is from, all of a sudden Percival just runs at high speed right past the troop's cart and stops and goes back, showing that he's basically, you know, super fast, and he caught up with the horse in no time. Still kind of freaked out, they kind of give back his luggage, and then Percival is asking him if they know someone that he's looking for. When he gives the name Ironside, they ask who this is, and Percival, with a very serious look, says that Ironside is his father and has killed his gramps. And to the shock of everyone else, they're asking if this is just a trip for revenge. Percival, obviously he's still young, but he doesn't know what this kind of journey this really is, because he still wants to know why his father killed his gramps and why he attacked them in the first place. Now, I can see that since, even though this series is called the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, it's very obvious that this circus troupe is going to be traveling with Percival for the first leg of his journey, similar to how Elizabeth and Hawk were basically Meliodas' companions for like the first few chapters of the 7 Deadly Sins manga until they caught up with Diane and then Bond. So, anyway, after all this, the troop says that they really don't know anything, and they offer Percival the opportunity to go to the village with them, and maybe even train him for food. Percival getting really excited since he's never seen a village before, and he's never really interacted with a bunch of other people since his grandfather has told him all this stuff when he was a kid. He is insanely excited to meet new people and see new places. Obviously, Donnie's like, they're not going to take him for free, and asks if he can do any tricks. Percival gets out a bow and arrow and aims his arrow at an apple in the distance. As he shoots it, it somehow turns around and it hits Donnie on the side of the head, shaving off like a good chunk of his hair. So this could actually be like semblances of maybe Percival's own magical power. Perhaps it's something that where he can like inadvertently redirect objects to other things, especially if he misses. So it could be something where is unknowingly manipulating the object, like he can't control it yet, and he could, if he masters it, he can like shoot arrows or even throw objects to specific people and control their trajectory. Or this could just be for comedic effect, and he just can't shoot a bow and arrow right. I just like to think that it's possible that it's like his early stages of his own magical power awakening. But anyway, so after all this, the troupe basically introduces themselves completely and saying that a bunch of people live in the village, and there are a bunch of towns and villages in Britannia, and these three have been putting on shows with everyone. As Percival is saying that their magic tricks are really awesome, Donnie comes in and says that these half-assed tricks, they're not really awesome. It'd be better if they didn't have to rely on these half-assed powers to make money. So I'm not sure what this means. It more or less confirms that this is some sort of magic, and it is possible that these three don't really want these kinds of powers due to how weak they are, or maybe they think that all this magic is kind of bad for regular people, and that they wish that they could do something to earn some cash without having to rely on such seemingly weak abilities. They then go on to say that there are just a bunch of talentless hacks. Donnie then goes on to say that if you're a talentless hack, you can't really make your dreams come true. The leader of the troop actually says that they are actually people that failed to become holy knights in the past. Their dreams were in fact crushed. They're dropouts. And as they mention holy knights, Percival remembers that his father, Ironside, and his grandfather were previously holy knights. This shocks the troops, saying like, what country are you from? What kind of what holy knights were they like? Stuff like that. Percival doesn't know what a country is. Everyone's shocked to see that Percival is a son of a holy knight. Now, we all know that basically from the hints from the first chapter that Percival's grandfather and Ironside were most likely holy knights to King Arthur back in Camelot. So there is some theories on how this could end up going. We do know what country that Ironside and Vulgus were from. But Donnie isn't really believing his story, and he's like, holy knights this, holy knights that, whatever. So they end up talking about having more of a conversation as they're talking about the village, how they're going to be treating Percival to a meal, and they'll just drop Percival off in the village for now. And then all of a sudden they see two villagers running towards them. As they're running, they say that the village is in danger and that it's being attacked by a wolf. Percival doesn't know what a wolf is, obviously, since he's lived off of like fish, small animals, and like giant birds on top of the mountain for all these years. Donnie getting kind of cocky, saying that they don't need holy knights to save them from a wolf. And then the very next page, once they get to the village, it's a giant monster wolf devouring an entire house. Just like that, Donnie makes a quick 180 and starts to run away, and the wolf monster tries to follow them. So yeah, this is honestly kind of funny. As soon as they're faced with real danger, Donnie's like, okay, we need the holy knights. Let's get the hell out of here. But then Percival jumps out of the cart, and then as they're asking what he's doing, Percival says that his grandfather told him this: unnerve the evil and help the weak. Risk your own life to become one who protects what's important. Saying that he'll never feel the way they do again, and that he won't let anyone else feel the same way either. So Percival gets ready to shoot the wolf with his bow and arrow, and just like before, unfortunately, his arrows honestly miss, curve around, hit him in the head, and pins his cloak to the ground. Percival really needs to shorten his cloak, because that is going to be a major hindrance in battles from now on. The wolf charges towards Percival, and Donnie, of all people, lunges in and saves him, getting clawed at the back by the wolf. Percival asks why he came back, and Donnie, in like a joking manner, says that because of Percival, he got fired up and after sitting down on his ass for so long, he just wanted to do something. He tells Percival to get away as this giant wolf is coming at him, but Percival manages to stop this wolf monster with one hand. Jumps up in the air, and then he just slaps the wolf straight into the ground and defeats it like it was nothing. And everyone basically celebrates Percival saving the village from that wolf monster, while the troop is also incredibly surprised at how strong Percival is. And then we get these last 3 panels of the same page showing the same mark that was on that stone bird that Percival and his grandfather caught back in chapter 1, fading away and disappearing. We then see that same wolf as before, and it seems like it's watching Percival through the crystal that it has around its neck. And then we see this new holy knight seemingly saying that that the little run will be able to defeat one of his familiars, and that it is time for the next one. Now, before I do anything, I just want to say to look at the background of the very last page of chapter 2. There is a stained glass window showing Arthur with his new Excalibur, Kath from the last arc of the series, holy knights, and Merlin on the right. So we can see that this is probably taking place in Camelot right now. So that is something really awesome. And that's another thing that I want to say, is that the wolf monster has a striking resemblance to Kath, which is very interesting. So it could be that this wolf might be like a new monster made from residual energy from Kath, for all we know. Maybe before Kath was defeated, he used a piece of his energy to, like, you know, have these monsters roaming around Britannia or something. But that's kind of like a minor theory. But I do like the little detail at the end where there's this stained glass window that shows basically the final battle against Kath and Arthur defeating Kath. So this gives us the big clue that this holy knight is probably most likely in Camelot. So we know that Percival is going to have to get to Camelot at some point in order to confront his father, if his father even is in Camelot. And we do know that the next chapter is called A Clue to Father. So it's very possible the Percival will meet someone with information on his father, or maybe he will meet a child of one of the sins, and it will end up leading to discovering Ironside's true motives. But yeah, that was chapter 2 of the Four Knights of Apocalypse. This was a really nice chapter. It really gives you the feel of an early fantasy adventure series, with Percival just landing in a forest, finding a circus troupe of dropout holy knights, and then him saving a village from a giant monster single-handedly. More of these rogue knights, or possible rogue knights, against King Arthur back in Camelot. So this is a really nice series that I cannot wait to keep reviewing for you guys. But what do you think is going to happen next? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to get notified on future videos. I will start to continue to do more of this Four Knights of Apocalypse content. Once we reach a certain amount of chapters, I might start doing some type of theory video in the future on what could happen in this series. With all that said and done, I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I hope to see you all next time. What's up guys, Chris from the Review Cave here, back with another chapter review for the 7 Deadly Sins sequel manga, Four Knights of the Apocalypse. Coming with you with chapter 3, Clues of the Father. Now, from last chapter, we saw Percival finally make it down from Godsfinger and finally reach Britannia, only for him to actually come in contact with a traveling circus group who end up taking him to a town as they meet a giant wolf monster attacking the town, and Percival showing just how strong he really is by one-shotting said wolf and earning the town's respect, with the chapter ending with the reveal of another mysterious holy knight who also uses monsters as familiars, similar to how Ironside did back in chapter 1. And now we get to start things off with chapter 3. So let's get into it. So the chapter starts off with all the villagers thinking that the wolf monster appearing is some sort of bad omen, and that they've never seen a wolf that big before. Which also kind of plays into my theory that possibly these monsters were left behind by Cath as Arthur defeated him back in the 7 Deadly Sins. But that is still just a working theory. Donnie gets patched up, and then they ask where his hero is, as it is revealed that he is actually with Elba farther in the forest. We then get a look at Percival's scar from chapter 1, and it is revealed that it is only recently healed. Apparently that scar was a lot worse than what we saw in chapter 1, but hey, Percival has a pretty quick healing factor from what we can tell, and even Elba is pretty shocked by this. And I'm gonna say this, it turns out that Elba is taking a bath with Percival, most likely because she thinks that he is actually a little kid. So already chapter 3 and we actually get some legitimate fan service in the show. I mean this is a sequel to 7 Deadly Sins, and the first chapter literally had Meliodas like groping Elizabeth, so of course moments like this would have to end up happening in the sequel manga. So Percival actually ends up groping her by mistake, being like, these are soft, and you know, Alba basically like dunks him in the water. So anyway, they go on to talk about how Donnie is actually a really cool guy, and how Percival basically inspired him to actually act. Alba then says that Donnie was most likely influenced by Percival to act because deep down he most likely never lost his ideals and dreams to become a holy knight. And then Alba actually ends up saying the Holy Knight's Creed, which Percival says that his grandfather actually used to say all these words a lot back in the day. So, something that I am very embarrassed to say is that I completely forgot that this was the Holy Knight's Creed. So I just feel like a complete 7 Deadly Sins noob by missing that. So yeah, that's just weird. Especially since after being told, Guild Thunder actually said that very same phrase a lot in the first season specifically. So as Alba begins to explain to Percival what Holy Knights are, and that they possess some type of magical power, Percival asks what magical power is, and if what Donnie and the others have been doing is magical power. And they said yes, but their powers aren't good enough to become Holy Knights. And then Alba ends up praising Percival for just lunging into battle like that against a monster without any regard for himself, just to protect people that he never met. And she even tells him that Percival actually has what it takes to become a Holy Knight. And then Percival just says he doesn't have any magical powers, and that it's honestly pretty unfortunate. We then come back to the town where everyone is praising Percival for being their hero, and they'll have a giant feast in order to celebrate Percival's good work. So Percival is given some berry juice, Donnie is saying that he would have loved some ale, and Donnie says that you're old enough to drink booze, and then Donnie ends up saying that he's not in love with a kid like you. And then Alba says, you act like an adult, but you're 16 like me. And then Percival drops the bomb saying that all three of them are the same age. That's Alba just, does a huge spit take on their leader. And literally comes to the realization that she literally just took a bath with someone that was her exact same age. So that is just hilarious. But anyway, so a kid comes over and says thank you for saving them. Okay, so with that little quick comedic scene out of the way, a kid says thanks to Percival for saving them from earlier, and that he actually has been living with his grandfather in the village for years, and that the grandfather says he wouldn't know what would have happened if he had lost his grandson. And Percival, obviously, this striking home with him, considering that he also had a very strong relationship with his grandfather, tells the kid to take care of and protect his gramps from now on. And as everyone is making merry and cheering, Percival goes around asking about Ironside throughout all the village members, and after getting repeatedly said nothing, like no one's heard of him, no information towards him, he literally gets frustrated and just screams out and says, "Come over here, Ironside," straight to the heavens. So as Alba is telling him that we don't know where he is right now, all of a sudden, a holy knight in black armor appears. The exact same holy knight that we saw at the end of chapter 2. And he says, while I was searching for the lively kid who beat my familiar and came here, what a fate, what a coincidence, as he lands down on the ground. And I have to say, this is actually a pretty cool and somewhat menacing design for a holy knight. He then says, you're quite in good shape. I see he had some feelings for his son after all, which does allude to the fact that Ironside may have actually let Percival live due to him being his father and not wanting to kill his own son. And maybe he just wanted to do all that to keep Percival on God's finger and not want to leave, or something like that. Or maybe Ironside just thought the minimum amount of power would have been enough to take care of Percival. We just don't know. But if it is revealed that Ironside still has some feelings towards his own son, then that would explain why Percival managed to survive, even with receiving such a grave wound. The knight then goes on to ask if Bulgus is also still alive. Percival asks how he knows his gramps, and then the Royal Knight just says, what is this attitude now, as the leader ends up trying to tell him to apologize, that as well as the rest of the group, telling him that that he actually lost his grandfather a few days ago, and that they should just leave him alone. As the leader is about to try and push him away, and then he realizes he's a holy knight, and he then begins to say that just because you're a holy knight doesn't mean you can just do whatever the hell you want. He tells the leader that he has business with the kid, and then he realizes that he's not moving an inch even though he's using all of his strength to move him, as the holy knight hits the leader aside and then is coughing on the ground. And even he is surprised by how quickly and badly he injured him, considering that he just wanted to shake him off. Percival asks who he is and how he knows Gramps and Ironside, then says that he is the Knight of Black Pelgart, and he was a friend of his father and Ironside. Percival says that he's not a kid and that he's Percival. And honestly, this is honestly weird interactions, because throughout these next few pages, both of them start having some sort of a conversation and they're both saying completely different things as if they're not even on the same page, which is honestly kind of hilarious for a hero-villain dynamic, especially because this is the first villain that Percival is going to be fighting in the series right now. So Percival's, I'm going to count to 5 so he can tell him why he's here, as the knight is saying that he likes the fact that Percival isn't even afraid of standing by him, as Donnie and Alba are like they're not even on the same wavelength at all. As Percival is counting down, the knight says he loves strong people, and then once Percival counts to 0, they both say at the exact same time, "Let's fight then," as it shocks the group that now they're starting on the same page, as both of them lunge towards each other as the villagers try and get out of the way so they don't get caught in the crosshairs. As Percival charges towards the knight questions why Percival fights barehanded. He doesn't have a weapon, and then Percival goes in and lands a punch, saying that if he wins, he will tell him about his father. The knight then thinks that the power to push his heavy armor is honestly very interesting and very impressive, but then he smacks Percival aside, saying that he will win and he'll take Percival with him. He says that Percival has nice traits and that he really wants to raise him by his own hands, as he continues to lunge his weapon and throwing Percival around. After Percival is hit, he manages to catch the weapon with his hands, and then says, "Who would go with you? The winner is me," as he jumps away from the weapon and lunges towards him, landing a barrage of punches on the knight, saying that He'll win, he'll win, he'll win. And I'm going to be honest, this is an obvious JoJo reference right here. I really just like when any kind of manga or anime does something like this. And as a JoJo's fan, I'm just happy. So yeah. The Holy Knight then grabs Percival by the face, saying that Percival doesn't care about any risks in order to help the weak, and that he doesn't flinch next to the strong, and impresses him a lot. The village kid that I was talking to earlier tries to ask someone to help him. The knight then says that Percival won't get very far while he's barehanded, which is something that even in the original Seven Deadly Sins series was apparent. Meliodas, Bon, Diane, and even Escanor could fight barehanded, but their weapons really did help in fights. So Percival will have to gain some sort of weapon in the future that will fit his fighting style. Unless he becomes one of the first people that actually can fight barehanded aside from Bon for the majority of the series. The Holy Knight then thinks that because Percival isn't using a weapon, that he most likely uses magic instead. And if he can't fight, he can't fight in a good mood. Percival then says that he doesn't have any magic. This shocks the knight, basically being like, what? While being the son of Ironside. So this goes to show that it's possible that Percival is most likely keen, or at least hereditarily could have very strong or similar magic to Ironside, and could actually explain how strong Ironside is in the magic way, in the ways of magic. So he then says that they should just end this fight right now, as Percival gets hit really hard on the side. And one interesting panel, we actually get to see that same Fox from Chapter 2 watching the fight from above. So Donnie tries to grab his sword so he can go help Percival, but Alba holds him back, saying that he can't just go in recklessly, that's a holy knight. He won't stand a chance. Donnie, obviously concerned about his new friend, does want to go in there and help Percival, being like, we can't just sit back here and do absolutely nothing. Being like, no one can actually stop him. And the kid is also saying that Percival won't lose. He's the hero that saved him and his grandfather. Percival then manages to land a nice punch onto the knight, causing him to go back. The knight questioning what happened, and then on the very last page of the chapter, we see Percival standing with energy around his fists, which is most likely the awakening of his power, as the next chapter is going to be called Unknown Power. And that's how the chapter ends. Once again, another good chapter for this new series, and I love that Percival is actually slowly but surely getting his magical powers and figuring out what exactly they are. It is obvious that this Holy Knight is most likely a comrade of Ironside's. It does give somewhat the impression that this guy might not currently be working with Ironside. The dialogue is honestly kind of weird. Are fellows, so it is possible that they are comrades. Though how he acts towards Percival and being like he could train Percival and raise him now is kind of weird, because it sets up like a tease that possibility of him not being as bad of a guy and maybe want to train Percival. But with how things are, I highly doubt it. But the really important thing is that Percival is in fact awakening his own magical power, and it is very possible that he is surrounded by his fists. So he could be the first person whose magical power can honestly amplify his own physical strength, and he'd be the only character in the series where he would not really require to use any weapons while he fights, at least at first. Now, I do kind of see him using a sword in the future, because let's just face it, a sword is really cool if you want to be a holy knight, or some variety of a blade. But Percival seems to be a very strong character regardless, and this shocks this knight, and even gives us some insight on how Ironside might actually have some real feelings for his own son. But again, there's not much to work with. Next chapter will most likely get the reveal of what Percival's power is and how it can be used, or at least the beginning portions of how his power is awakening. But yeah, overall, another great chapter. We got some really nice action, and next week will most likely be a full-on action-based chapter for possibly the first half, since we're fighting a full-fledged Holy Knight, and Percival is finally awakening his own magic powers. And for all we know, what I said in chapter 2 about his power maybe changing the trajectory of objects could actually be a part of his magical power. We just don't know yet. But overall, really nice chapter. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Let's keep the ball rolling so I can keep making these reviews, and hopefully when more chapters come out, I will make some theory videos on what I think can happen in this series. But with all that said and done, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so I know to keep making videos like this and so you can get notified on future videos. If you have any idea of what could possibly happen or any theories for the future of the series, leave them down in the comments down below. And I hope you guys have an awesome day. What's up guys, Chris from the Review Cave here, and today we are back with another chapter review for the 7 Deadly Sins sequel manga, The 4 Nights of the Apocalypse. Real quick thing, this will obviously contain spoilers for the recent chapter of The 4 Nights of Apocalypse, since obviously it just started. And I've already done 3 videos talking about the recent 3 chapters. And hopefully from this point onward, I can actually get this video out for each chapter the week of the chapter's actual release. So, without further ado, let's get started with the video. So, in the last chapter, with the aftermath of Percival taking out that giant wolf monster, he ended up encountering the magic knight known as Pelgart, who was actually searching for Percival himself. The fight begins, and Percival actually ends up unlocking his own magic at the very end, despite him thinking he does not have any. And that's honestly where this new chapter begins. Chapter 4 is titled Unknown Magic. So, let's begin. So, the chapter starts off with Percival wondering what the heck happened, how he was able to push the Magic Knight back. And Pelgart is like, I don't have any magic. Those were his exact words. Pelgart then goes on to say, if so, please explain to me what's overflowing from your body. And Percival, after looking at his hands, actually starts freaking out, wondering what the heck is going on. It feels gross to him, and he's trying to get whatever's covering his hands off of his body. And honestly, Percival keeps running around trying to get it off. And then, when he gets close to Pelgart, he says, to get it off. Pelgart's trying to tell him that it's his magic, and by accident, he launches some sort of energy-based attack and knocks Pelgart back again. And that's actually hilarious, because now Donnie is telling him that what Percival is using is his own magic. And Pelgart, standing up, says that the magic that he's using basically is empowering his fists with magical power, and it might be an incantation type of magic. So this is actually something that I didn't really pay too much attention to back in 7 Deadly Sins due to, well, the pure awesomeness, but it's the different types of magic, and this chapter goes on to tell us what Percival's magic type actually is. So, honestly, Percival, now that he unlocked his powers, being the naive kid he is, asks the Magic Knight, can I use my magic to fight you? And he says yes. And now Percival is incredibly confident that he'll win now that he has his magic power. And Pelgart, getting ready, he launches his own magical attack, which is a giant fireball that comes around and hits Percival. And this is his magical power is called Blaze. And Donnie mentions that this type of fire magic is leagues above the leader's fire magic. And Pelgart controls the fireball, and Percival continues to attempt to dodge over and over, and this looks amazing, seeing Percival twisting and weaving through every single attack to try and dodge it. As Pelgart says, how do you hope to win if you're too busy dodging? Percival says he's right, and as he says that, Pelgart, asking what he'll do, launches the fireball straight at him as Percival grasps his hands together, lifts him up, and then knocks the fireball into the ground, seemingly dispersing it. But, right out the gate, the fireball ends up hitting him from underneath him as it dispersed and continued to converge onto him, hitting him with a massive fireball. But, what is interesting is that the flames that are hitting Percival aren't going out. Pelgart then begins to say that his magic, his blaze, the fireball that he used, doesn't go out until he himself disperses it or until his target is reduced to nothing. He's trying to get Percival to surrender. Meanwhile, he's trying to convince Percival to surrender. And same with his friends. They're trying to tell him to just surrender because it's not worth him dying over right now. Percival says he can't stand losing. We see in these panels that he is most likely subconsciously morphing the magic that he has on his fists around his body, creating a type of barrier with his own magical power. And Pelgart is honestly pretty impressed and confused by this because he just awakened his magical power and he's already pretty adept of using it. So he is wondering what's going on. But he then says that it's too late for this to do any real difference because Percival is already incredibly injured from what's going on. He tries to get Percival to surrender, but We then see on this exact same page that some little blob thing that at first I'm mistaken to be Percival managing to grab onto his arm somehow, grabs on and says win. And then we see a bunch of mini magic type golems that Percival seems to be subconsciously creating is starting to surround and grab onto Pelgard. He then goes on to say that what he's doing, he's basically changing his magic up to the point where he can basically subconsciously create magical golems and have them go towards a certain goal, which is, well, confining and trying to take down Pelgard. Which he then confusingly said, being obviously confused as we are too, is that this type of magic is seemingly degeneration magic, since it basically breaks up his own magical power like this. So the mini magic golems are clinging onto his arms, and it's almost as if they know that by sealing his arms, it will lift the spell. So that is actually pretty interesting. And the fire surrounding Percival actually disperses. And then we see that his wounds are actually healing. Donnie is surprised as well, but so is Pelgard. He's like, this is honestly impossible. He's wondering what his magic type is. He goes on, like, destruction type, incantation type, degeneration, healing. And it's not one of those types. And he's like, perhaps this is the magic type that is 1 out of 10,000 people. The hero type. So a brand new magical type that we had no idea of. And honestly, he then begins to wonder, is Percival, with this type of magic, could he actually be one of the future 4 Knights of the Apocalypse? And he was like, they will become aware of each other sooner or later, and he's much too valuable to die. Now, before I go on to continue, let me just state this one thing. Ironside went to Percival and Bulgus back in the first chapter to try and erase who could potentially be one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. Even though he did kind of let Percival live, from what we can tell, it is highly possible that Ironside wanted to kill the 4 Knights of Apocalypse before they became a threat. But from what it looks like, Pelgard might know who the other 4 Knights of Apocalypse could be, and that he's too valuable to die, which means he might be someone who is looking for the 4 Knights of Apocalypse so that they can meet and possibly nurture them so they can become stronger, maybe even become heroes. Or maybe Pelgard really is a true blue villain and wants to try and make them into the actual villains of the story. But we don't get much time for his inner monologue, as Percival just strolls up and lands one clean punch right onto Pelgard as he falls back. As Percival says, let's continue the fight. Ending the chapter. With the next chapter name reveal being the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. So, it is looking as though we could actually get the reveal of what the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse truly are, who actually made this prediction, and possibly guesses on who the other 3 members of the Knights of the Apocalypse are. I mean, we, the readers, obviously think that this is going to be the children of the 7 deadly sins. I mean, it's incredibly obvious. We wouldn't have had the last chapter of the 7 deadly sins focused primarily on Tristan, and us getting a one-shot based off of Bond's son, Lancelot, if they weren't going to be a major part of the story or the main characters. That, and we've seen, like, actual sketches from the 4 Knights of Apocalypse manga before this was even revealed, that these characters were going to play a major role. Now, honestly, I can't wait for the real explanation for what the 4 Knights of Apocalypse are, because from what we can tell, the next chapter is most likely going to be more of an info dump for us telling what exactly the 4 Knights of Apocalypse really are and who they could potentially be. And we might get some real information on Ironside and even Pelgard on what he is actually planning. Could he actually be a villain who wants to gather the 4 Knights of Apocalypse to destroy Arthur? Or could it be someone who knows the true meaning of the prophecy in the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse and wants to make them heroes for King Arthur? We're not entirely sure, because we do know that Ironside and his gang basically betrayed King Arthur in the past, and for all we know, Pelgard could just be secretly wanting to keep Camelot and King Arthur safe while on the guise of a traitor. That's something that I honestly hope that's something that happens. But regardless, we had a really great action-packed chapter, and we got the reveal of Percival's magic type, which is Hero, and it's seemingly like it is incredibly overpowered, considering that it can heal him. He can heal himself. He can disperse his magic across his body. It's a type of incantation to power up his fists, cover his body in mana to protect from like the elements or physical damage as like a barrier. He can disperse his magic as a type of destruction, or he could use it as a degeneration type to make like those little magical golems. And since all that is technically something called a hero type, could the rest of the Four Knights of Apocalypse have this type of magical power? Maybe, maybe not. But while this is seemingly overpowered, we have to remember that Percival has been trained for 16 years without magic, so it's very possible that when this fight's over, he will be incredibly drained. Because despite this being an overwhelmingly big cliche in any anime or manga, where the hero unlocks their incredible power when fighting some insanely strong opponent that's stronger than them, they almost instantly master it, or there's some kind of drawback to unlocking it right away, and once you finish using it, you're drained for the rest of the day. I have a feeling that Pelgart might actually be a good guy, under the guise of being a traitor, so no one suspects him. But that's all I really got to say for now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. It really helps. And if you really do like this type of manga review, I will continue to do this weekly so I can keep covering this manga. Once we get enough chapters, I will try and do some theory videos on what could potentially happen in this manga. And don't forget to leave comments down below on what you think of Percival's new magic type, and who the rest of the Four Knights of Apocalypse could actually be, if not the Children of the Sins. As well as what you think of the possibility of Pelgart actually being a good guy, instead of an actual bad guy like Ironside seemingly is. But with all that said and done, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at the official Review Cave for updates on future videos. And with all that said and done, I hope you guys have an awesome...
What's up guys, Chris from Review Cave here, and today I'm back with another video reviewing the latest chapter of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, the sequel series to the 7 Deadly Sins. And my god, was this another great chapter. I have to say, for the beginning chapters, I would basically make up the first volume of the physical release of the manga. I have to say, it's a really good start. We get basically Percival's introduction, his mission, the idea of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, Percival unlocking his magical powers, and then we get the introduction of what could possibly be the overarching goal of the story. So without further ado, let's go over real quick what happened in the last chapter. So in the last chapter, Percival's fight with Pelgart was getting more intense as he just unleashed his new magical power. Obviously some comedicness of him not knowing what his magical power was ensues, and it shows that Percival's power has a lot of variety of different things, whether it be enhancing his physical strength, or dispersing magical power in the form of a high density blast, breaking his energy apart so he can create like magical golems to do specific tasks and goals, healing himself, and the list goes on. So it is dubbed the hero type, a basically 1 in 1,000 or 100,000 people ability that is incredibly rare, that Pelgart states. And honestly, I have to say, I was kind of concerned about Percival having this type of power, but as we later see in this next chapter, it does make somewhat sense for this story, and it isn't a cop-out or seems incredibly too convenient or not the best possible thing for the story. So let's get started with the events of the manga. So in chapter 5, we start off right where we left off with Percival landing that one nice blow to Pelgart after getting the hang of his power. Everyone on the sidelines is wondering if Percival can actually win this. Percival obviously looking pretty confident, but Donnie is actually being very realistic, saying, do you guys actually believe that Percival can win this? Pelgart is honestly getting incredibly excited because he wants to know more about Percival and his power. Basically says what we've been stating previously, that since Percival just awakened to his magic power, he's already quickly grasps how to use and control it, and that Percival is strong. And he literally like tips his hat off to him, which, so Percival is kind of weak to flattery, says that he doesn't deserve praise, and he's actually saying like, okay, so now that I'm about to win this, can you tell me about my dad? And Pelgart just unleashes Blaze to the fullest extent, basically taking down all of Percival's magical golems. As Donnie says, I doubt he's even breaking out half of his force. So this just goes to show that even though Percival was landing some hits,
this isn't falling into the classical cliche of the character gaining this new power and utterly obliterating the first opponent he has. And Percival, after seeing his little golem pop back up and run back towards him, Belgard says that he can never win this fight and that Percival is still very inexperienced. Percival says to get him if he can, but Donnie, realizing the danger of the situation, uses his magical power to make Pelgard float so that Percival can run away. Donnie says that Pelgard isn't trying to psych him out, but Percival has no chance against fighting him. Percival, obviously being confused, is like, so I got like a 50% chance of winning? Donnie says, no, 0%. And Percival says, but he needs to tell him about his dad, and Donnie keeps telling him to run. As then Pelgard unleashes a massive blaze attack, knocking back both Percival and Donnie, as well as other civilians as they are beginning to run away, because now he is more or less burning down the village from that last attack. Donnie's down, still conscious mind you. Alba and Katz are down as well. Just like that, Pelgard is walking towards Percival and Donnie, saying that, basically being like, this injury that happened to Donnie is just desserts for interfering on a one-on-one fight. But then all of a sudden, the fox that we saw in chapter 2 appears before Percival, lugging around his luggage. So Pelgard looks at the fox and says, even a beast wants to meddle with me, and tries to get it to go away. He tries to shoo it away. But then the fox starts to wiggle its tail, and all of a sudden, it has a magical bead. If you remember from the 7 Deadly Sins, these are basically beads with particular spells in them, whether it be explosions, teleportation, healing, and it's honestly a really good support item for magic knights when they're in the midst of battle. So this fox has one, and throws it to the ground, and all of a sudden, Percival, and Donnie have disappeared. And Pelgard, damning the fox for using a spell bead, he curses the fox for using it and asks who it was. Then, all of a sudden, we cut to Percival and Donnie at the location where they are currently at. And I have to say, I'm liking that despite this being the beginning of a new series, Nakaba Suzuki is really going all in with these 2-page spreads in almost every single chapter. So Percival and Donnie are wondering where they are, and Donnie literally says that they're on the dragon's backbone. It's basically like a 30 miles away from where they were previously, and it's just one giant mountain growth. So I don't know if this may be like an actual dragon skeleton, which that would be really cool. But now, in all honesty, they are very far away from where Pelgard was. And Percival wants to hurry back as the fox actually starts to speak. So, let me just say this. This fox, whatever its name is going to fill in the role of the talking mascot like Hawk did in the 7 Deadly Sins. Only, from what we're going to see, it is more of an advisory role instead of like more of a comedic and more heart-based role that Hawk played. So the fox speaks up and says that he literally just saved their lives and to not go wasting it. He states that the knight was after Percival and Donnie since he got in the way, so they have no real reason to worry about the village anymore since his targets are no longer there, which means they'll basically be safe. But just like that, Donnie starts freaking out because the fox talks. Percival, thinking that Britannia has talking animals, Donnie, being the rational one, says no, even though we got Hawk. But then the fox then speaks up and says that the kid has to come with him, that Percival needs to hurry up and follow him, because since Belgard is honestly on his tail. Percival is wondering why Pelgard is going to be chasing him, and the fox says he'll explain. Percival says that he's not going anywhere because Pelgard still has to tell him about his father, but the fox says that he wouldn't know. He states that even though he was part of the same group that his father was in, he wouldn't know where they were at all times. Percival thinks that he was just lying before. But the fox says they just wanted a convenient excuse to fight Percival, and it wouldn't have actually been a lie unless he actually lost. But he was incredibly sure that he was going to win. And I'm not gonna lie, Pelgard seems to have been holding back for the entirety of the fight up until the end. So Percival may very well have lost the fight if they kept going, since he just awakened his power and doesn't fully know how to utilize it and to fight other people with magical powers. So it's very possible that Pelgard, while a lot stronger, could have also outlasted Percival, because he could have just ran out of magic power insanely fast insanely quickly. So anyway, going back, Donnie is obviously skeptical of this fox, says that he doesn't know if he can trust him. The fox says to trust his, well, wild instincts. He then reiterates that Percival is the problem since Pelgart is going after him. Percival then asks again why Pelgart was after him, and Donnie asks who he was, because his power was ridiculously high. The fox then goes on to say that the Black Knight serves an evil king, and his gangs hunting down the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, as we see not just Pelgart and Ironside, but 2 more knights in the background, as well as right in the middle, King Arthur. Now let me say this, it was confirmed previously that these are knights from Camelot, and if he was honestly served, and if these guys served basically directly under King Arthur, then it's obvious that they're going to be insanely powerful. Maybe towards the level of, maybe Gil Thunder would be at this point, so possibly, or honestly pretty strong, so let's just go with that. They're insanely strong since they have to work under King Arthur. What's interesting here is that the fox says Evil King. Now this could just be a title since Arthur possesses the power of chaos, or maybe the power of chaos slowly corrupted him after everything that happened with Kath, and he started to slowly grow more maniacal, or maybe there's some reason to why he's saying this. Percival's like, more holy knights. Donnie obviously hasn't heard of them, and the fox says that they don't exist, or the fact that they don't exist yet. Or at least that's how the prophecy went with it. So as they're wondering that these could possibly just be knights from the future, the fox says that he was ordered by their opponents to find them, and now he finally got one. Percival is wondering, like he did, and what they are. As we then get a 2-page spread showing us basically silhouettes of possible designs for the 4 Knights of Apocalypse. Now obviously these aren't going to be like the actual designs for the 4 Knights of Apocalypse, because if you remember the wanted posters for the 7 Deadly Sins, they all looked incredibly more different and way more detailed than the actual sins were, and even more badass looking. So this is honestly probably something to just give us a sense of intensity of how strong these characters are and how powerful they will be. He then goes on to say that these are known as famine, pestilence, war, and death. And all the way to the left, the character on the left is obviously Percival, and he is, from what we can tell, he is supposed to represent the Horseman of Death. And since Percival is basically the protagonist, it's obviously he'll be the leader of this new group. But if we look over at all this, we can see that Pestilence could actually be Tristan if we go by the hair growth, if we go by the length of his hair and his hairstyle. And the one on the right and Famine could probably be Lancelot, due to again the hair and possibly the facial design that we were given. War is the only wild card because we aren't entirely sure if this is going to be King of the Yan's child, which I was hoping for. But this is actually stated that possibly the 4th Knight could be the child of War, could potentially be the child of Zeldris and Gelda. So since they were basically a major part in the second to last arc of the series with the Demon King arc, it is possible that they can come back in their child, which could be insanely powerful. I mean, half demon, half vampire, it could be insanely strong. It is very possible. The fox then goes on to say that these 4 knights are bringing 4 world-destroying calamities. So all 4 of them are supposed to be calamities that could destroy the world. Donnie starts slowly freaking out, and then he says, wait, if the Black Knight has his eyes on Percival, then the fox basically confirms what Donnie was honestly wondering, that Percival is one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, which us the readers knew from the very beginning once they were mentioned. So it is honestly very nice to get the full-on confirmation that Percival is destined to be one of these legendary knights. So I am honestly very happy that this chapter more or less gave us a little more information on what the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse could potentially be, as well as giving us actual real silhouettes of who they can actually be. So it more or less confirms that Tristan and Lancelot are the other two members of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, and the 4th one could maybe be Deanne and King's child, or Zeldris and Gelda's child. Either one I'm fine with. But yeah, that was pretty much the chapter. the fox comes in, saves Percival and Donnie, and tells them about the Four Knights of the Apocalypse. We get the possibility that King Arthur might be the end-all, be-all villain of the story, or it might just be a bunch of misinformation that's making the Four Knights look out to be potential villains, even though with the Seven Deadly Sins, they were not villains at all, and they were just framed. The prophecy was probably saying something like, since they were supposed to take down King Arthur, it is very likely that the whole quote about, King Arthur being an evil king might actually be true due to the power of chaos possibly corrupting him over time. We're not entirely sure. And when the fox said that he came because of the enemies when he said they're enemies, it could have meant the Four Knights of Apocalypse, which I don't think that is. I think the enemies of Ironside and his gang. So, if we know this, the possibility of the group that sent the fox may very well... I can't talk. The group that sent this fox may very well be the Sins themselves. They are in fact the friends of King Arthur. They're friends with him. They've known him for years. If he started to become evil, and the prophecy stated that these foreign calamities were supposed to defeat him in the future, and for all we know, their kids could be these next few knights, obviously they'd be opposed to him and try and keep them safe. As well as the fourth member that they have no way of locating. So this all kind of makes sense. Now, will we end up getting introduced to the rest of the knights? Yes. I honestly hope that within the next chapter or two, we will get to see at least Tristan show up. Because I think, if anything, since the last chapter of the manga was obviously in Tristan's point of view, I very well think that he is going to be the first knight that we are going to see in the series join up with Percival. Lancelot will most likely be the second, since he had that whole one-shot in between the end of the Seven Deadly Sins and the release of this series. And the fourth will join them at some later point. Now, if we're going to go the Seven Deadly Sins route and wait a while before they all eventually come together, I'd say maybe by chapter 20, if he wants to drag it out a little bit, explore this new Britannia after 10, 15, or 20 years past the events of the original. I honestly want to see how this ends up, because we can see more of Britannia, more of the people, and more of what happened at the end. Because if we remember at the end of the Seven Deadly Sins, Death Pierce wanted to make a kingdom of humans and only humans. So it's very possible that maybe we'll run into him at some point, because I don't think Suzuki would mention that at the very last chapter of the series and not have it be relevant. Because honestly, I think this is going to be Suzuki's chance to really explore Britannia in the best way possible, because not only have only 4 core members of the main cast, but we could see how things have changed over these last couple of years, and how Arthur himself has changed, and what potential evils will lie ahead. But yeah, this was the longest video I believe I've made for this series by far, even though this was a standard chapter. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you look forward to more reviews of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse in the future. What do you think will happen with Percival and the rest of the Four Knights? Do you think King Arthur is actually evil, or do you think it's all just a bunch of misunderstandings? Leave it down in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to let me know that you enjoyed this content, and so you can keep updated on future videos. As always, I will do my very best to keep these videos going weekly, so that you guys can have your weekly source for the latest chapters of the series, as well as other speculations on what could potentially happen. And with all that said and done, I hope you guys have an awesome day.